Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the humpiest knife of them all? We shall soon find out, as in today's video we are comparing 3 of my favorite Spyderco models, featuring the subcompact Para 3, the Happy Medium PM2, and the extra large Military 2. In our comparison, we will look at design, build quality, action, and overall feel in general. On top of all that, I'll also share one of my crazy discoveries that nobody else talks about. Hey everyone, welcome to Salvo EDC. It's very important that we are not here today to compare blade steel or handle material, so we won't argue which one feels nicer, G10 or carbon fiber, or what cuts better, Cruer or S90V. In today's video we are here to decide whether or not we can name a superior design out of these 3 pocket knives, starting with my beloved Para 3, which was not only my very first Spyderco, but also the very first folder that I have ever owned. And I still remember the moment when I gave it the first flick on my lake house balcony. The overall feel of this knife, the design, the action just completely blew me away and converted me into a Spyderco fanatic for the rest of my life. Just listen to this music. This is a basic edition Para 3 by the way, with black G10 and S30V blade steel that I just quickly picked up because I desperately needed a knife around the house, and these other 2 Spydercos are both limited edition sprint runs, which in my opinion should make them feel nicer. Yet this vanilla Para 3 has hands down the best production quality on the table. And if we would base our judgment solely on flimsiness, centering or blade play, this knife would be the clear winner, because the walk and talk of this knife is hands down perfect, even after 6 years of heavy use. The PM2 however has some weird gaps between the G10 and the steel liners, and it also tends to develop blade play. Meanwhile the Para 3 remains rock solid and dead reliable. On the other hand, the bougie carbon fiber Milli 2 comes with a lanyard tube that slightly sticks out, and when the knife is closed the blade and the handle scales are also out of sync in a weird tilted way. Not to mention that both the PM2 and the Milli 2 has a tendency to develop a terrible lock stick, meanwhile my Para 3 is completely free from this issue. The Para 3 is also easier to disassemble, clean or scale swap compared to any of the bigger ones, because it comes with 1 less sets of body screws, and the way its lanyard tube was joined to its liners is also much easier to work with. So I already bought some Flightanium for my Para 3, and if you guys wanna see the scale swap, definitely hit subscribe because that video is coming soon. However, the Para 3 is definitely not a perfect knife, and probably its biggest downside is the absolutely terrible blade to body ratio. Spyderco could have easily sandwiched the longer blade between these 2 handle scales, which is somewhat true for all 3 of these knives by the way, as they all come with terrible blade to body ratios. And on my datasheet you can clearly see that these 3 designs are easily outperformed by the Police 4 Lightweight and even the Police 4 G10. But if you truly wanna go down this rabbit hole, the absolute Stat King Spyderco knife that I've ever seen is the Cali 3.5, which is one of the most efficient Spyderco designs of all time. This means that on paper, the Para 3 is the least efficient in terms of blade to body ratio. But the even bigger surprise for me was the PM2, which is the crappiest design based on its heft, as it gives me the least amount of blade and least amount of cutting edge based on the weight I have to carry. So even though it is not bending the laws of knife making by any means, in this highly controlled environment the big boy Military 2 beats everyone in terms of design efficiency. And this is mostly bad news for the PM2, because the Military has a crazy 25% more cutting edge, meanwhile it weighs only 11% more. And in terms of usability, this makes a huge difference. You give these 2 knives to anyone, and they will spot the incredible increase in cutting performance instantly. However, they won't necessarily feel the 11% difference in terms of weight. The same is true when we compare the 2 bigger knives to the smallest one, as I can clearly feel the change in dimension, but I cannot truly tell the difference in terms of heft. And on top of all that, since the Milli 2 is such a giant knife, it actually feels surprisingly light, which is crazy. For example, the Para 3 is a tiny knife, but it feels relatively heavy, because for a knife of this size, you would expect it to be somewhat lighter. And if you pick up the Military 2, which is only less than an ounce heavier, but has a 38% longer cutting edge. The size difference will just simply blow your mind. This is also true when these knives are in my pocket, as the Para 3 has such a small form factor that it carries heavier than the rest of these knives, since it just hangs on the top of my pocket and bounces around. Meanwhile, the Military 2 fills my pocket a lot more and just sits there nicely because its center of weight takes place much deeper. However, we should not get fixated on large things in my pants, as we still have to discuss the grip design, which might seem insignificant, since all three of these knives come with a very similar form factor, but when we start using them, there is definitely a day and night difference. First of all, I have two big problems with the PM2. This knife comes with a very dumb and annoying finger guard. Aesthetically, it makes the blade look like it was a very old knife and it has been sharpened 1,000 times already. Plus, this very same finger guard screws up the knife's action, as it makes the blade bounce back from my finger that actuates the lock bar. This issue is exclusive to the PM2 only, so the Para 3 and the Military 2 close much more safely. Also, the PM2 has a weird sharp corner on its grip, which becomes a terrible hotspot when I'm holding the knife in a traditional way. So when it comes to the PM2, there's only one real way for me to grab it, as coming back here hurts my hand. But what about the Para 3? Well, when I chew back on these scales, they do not hurt my hand because Spyderco made the very same corner much softer. However, in this scenario, the Para 3 turns into a 3-finger knife, which is absolutely not ideal. So long story short, I can only use both of my PM2 and my Para 3 in a choked up position, and I don't have the option to switch grips on any of these smaller knives. Switching grips becomes optional with the Military 2 only, which is the single knife here that gives us the liberty of choice. And this makes the knife much more intuitive and much more enjoyable to use, as I can freely select the most appropriate grip depending on each situation. And now let me show you something crazy, because I also discovered another huge difference here, as the Military 2 has a much better in-hand alignment over both the Para 3 and the PM2, as this big knife naturally aligns itself parallel to my entire arm, no matter how I wield it. Essentially, the blade becomes a natural extension to my hand, which is a huge deal if you think about it, because it makes it a lot easier to perform precise cuts with the entirety of this large blade. Meanwhile, both the PM2 and the Para 3 have a very weird tilted alignment as I handle them. To hold these two smaller knives straight, I literally need to twist my wrist in an unnatural way, and even though the tip of my Para 3 is a lot closer to my fingers, the 38% longer Military 2 still gives me much more accuracy. And when I made this discovery, I instantly knew that there was no going back, and the Military 2 simply became the clear winner out of these three Spyderco knives. If you have small hands, or you genuinely want something smaller than a 4-inch blade, the Para 3 can still be an amazing choice, especially if you live in a state or a country where knife laws prevent you from getting a bigger knife. But unfortunately, I do not see a legit argument to get a PM2 anymore, because it's clearly outperformed both by the Para 3 as well as the Military 2. The only scenario in which I would still turn my head after a PM2 is if I saw one with some crazy exotic blade steel. For example, GP Knife just dropped one with CPM Rec 76, but I also really enjoyed this DLC coded Kruger one, as Spyderco typically ships Kruger with micarta scales and shiny blades. But generally speaking, I would never buy myself a vanilla PM2, since the finger guard and the scale design hurts my hand, and the Military 2 comes with a 21% longer blade, but only with an 11% weight increase. What do you guys think? Which one of these knives would fit you the most? Let me know in a comment. Also, if you'd like to see how to fix the lock stick on any of these models without disassembling them, make sure you watch my previous video. Thank you for sticking around all the way, and I'll see you in the next one.